This is a VR to FLP on my prepper gaps and what I feel I need of. What I'd like to do is start off with some of my background. When I was very young, back in 1976, my dad was working on our house back then and fell about 24 to 30 feet. Um, and with that, I had to work for a long time. Back then, I learned about the importance of emergency services because the 911 system back then was a phone tree system, and it took about 45 minutes before an ambulance was able to arrive to help my father back in 1976. Some of the other big things I learned about back then was food preps, as money was very tight back then, but we never went hungry. So I learned about making a pantry and how to stock some of those type of foods and looking for specials and stuff like that. So I've learned a lot over the years with that type of stuff. Some of my biggest background toolbox that I have is my emergency services background. I've been involved in the fire service since 1984, including wildland firefighting. In 1991, I got involved in emergency services working on the ambulance, and I've been doing that since, which I currently am a EMT in the state of Pennsylvania and also a run the American Heart Training Center. In 1993, I became a CPR instructor, and in 1998, I started teaching driver education for emergency services. I feel that's one of my biggest positives is my background in emergency services, including being deployed to 3 major disasters in the United States. In 2005, we were at Katrina. 2008, I was at Gustav. And in 2012, I was at Sandy. And I was part of the Pennsylvania EMS Strike Team, which is a state resource that can supply 150 ambulances with over 200 providers anywhere in the United States, able to be self-sufficient for at least 72 hours. And most of our apparatus and equipment is set up to run 24/7. Some of my other big events in my life was back in 1998, I lost a son at birth. That alone was one of the hardest things in my life to deal with. It taught me a lot about mental stress and how life operates. And where being able to reach out to people that you may not think can help you and discuss things that can make a difference. It has affected me very much over the years. In 2008, while I was teaching, back then I used to always turn off my cell phone. Not put it on silent, I would physically turn them off. I did get a phone call from my mother to advise me that my father was being flown to Bethlehem Hospital after suffering a head bleed. One of the biggest things I learned there is I learned a lot about strokes and head bleeds. 21 days later, we had to make that tough decision, as at that point he has not come out of a coma, he's been on a ventilator, and we had to make that tough decision. And that decision was to terminate life support because my dad did not want to be dependent on a machine. In 2010, I would get married, and in 2011, I would become a father of a wonderful son who is now 6, going to be 7 in September. In 2013, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and would come to live with us Thanksgiving of that year, and died in January of 2014 with me and my wife at her side. That was the second hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So when I looked at the biggest gaps in thoughts, I thought, well, I'm going to outline some of my stuff. And some of it I have covered and some of it I haven't, but maybe some of this will help others. One of the biggest things is state of affairs, urgent preps is how I looked at things. Um, H2O, water, a way to purify it, store it, and replenish it. Not many people think about that. But how do you replenish your water if it's a major long-term event? So I've started looking at that. Some of my other big things I thought about is like rice, pasta, and beans for food. They're normally pretty cheap, easy to come by, have a pretty long shelf life. And when it's cold and wet and miserable out, always makes you feel warm inside. Some of the other items I thought about was peanut butter. It's a high protein product, has a lot of calories. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's just about 6,000 calories in a large peanut butter container. Some other things I have thought about with my state of affairs and prep would be honey. Honey is a good thing because it's a sweetener, antibacterial, along with other positive uses for the product. Another important prep that some people don't always think about is salt. That's one thing I always have in my house only because I love to cook. Another important thing is LED flashlights. How are we going to power it? Yes, you have AA batteries for a short-term event, but how are you going to power that in a long-term event? Is there a way to recharge it? Is there crankable flashlights? Stuff like that a lot of people don't think about. Some other very important preps that some people don't always think about is first aid and medicines. What products do you have on hand? What do you have available? And stuff like that. Especially if you're on prescription meds or if you're diabetic, or, are there natural remedies you can use to replace those? Are there other antibiotics that you could use if you get sick? Stuff like that people need to think about. Another important thing I think about is vitamins. Having some type of like a multivitamin or minerals, so that, when you're stressed, you're able to replenish things, or if you're ran down because you're being up too many hours during an event, you're able to keep healthy. Fire starters is another one. Matches, lighters. Do you have a stockpile of firewood? How long is it going to last? Is that going to attract people to you? Do you have other methods of starting a fire? Stuff like that. If you're working out of a bag, do you have stuff available? Radio communications is going to be key. That could be a receiver where you're able to get AM, FM, shortwave, be able to listen to the weather, stuff like that. But having a multifunction radio where you would have maybe able to transmit, like on the ham frequencies, GRS radio, stuff like that. Being able to communicate with one radio or having multiple radios so you can use them is going to be key for some people with their preps. Weapons and ammo is another big prep that some people may not have enough. How much is enough and how much is too much to be carrying or stockpiled is going to be some of those key questions. Another one that people don't think about, and these two not everybody thinks about, is physical preparedness, your conditioning. How can you better yourself? Well, how about walking, hiking, kayaking, biking? One of the biggest people I follow, besides FLP, Nina, another big person that I follow is SOS or BA, depending on, if you're on FLP site, everybody knows SOS and Sippy. He goes over some of that preparedness stuff about how they use bikes and going out with the kids fishing and hiking and stuff like that to keep healthy. That's very important. And one of the last state of affairs urgent preps that people need to think about is mental preps. What's new in the news? Is it fake or isn't it fake news? And that's what I based my thoughts of. Probably one of my biggest gaps And I know this may not happen through the group, but you never know. Things may come out of making mutual aid groups, whatever. But one of my biggest gaps that I have is not having a bug out group or land to go to. Yes, for the short-term events, I think I'm pretty okay. One of my biggest goals would be if I'm at work, getting back to my house. And I shared some of that info with Backwood Law and FLP in the emails and discussed what I was carrying in my vehicle to get back home from where I work, which is about 18 miles. If we needed to leave the house, one of the places we could go is to the north, which would be a camper that we have at a campsite. It's off a major route, so if it's a small event, wouldn't be an issue. But if it was a SHTF type event, may not be the best location to be at. And it's old, and moving that camper off that site will never happen. It's an old bunkhouse camper, so it when that leaves there, it'll probably come out in pieces because it's been there so long. Part of that, I would like to become more friends with some of the groups that are out there, some of the people on FLP site, along with any of the other people that I follow on YouTube, and hopefully share my background and experiences and hopefully learn stuff from them. And I think my medical background is one of those biggest events. So I'm hoping to be able to share that. My next biggest gap, I feel, is weapons and ammo. When I was young, my mom always hated guns. Would break out in a cold sweat just having a gun around. Didn't matter if it was loaded or not, or even if there was a police officer in the house. She would get extremely nervous around guns. So I never had that chance of having a gun or weapons like that. Never had a bow. Did learn how to shoot a bow many years ago when I was probably 16. Now going on 50, may not be as accurate as they used to be. But that's going to be one of my biggest things, is some type of a weapon, be it bow, gun, even learning more about fishing, because it's been years since I fished. I do have equipment to do that, but hopefully I can better myself with some of that. Of my gaps, I think that's the two biggest that I've found. I'm sure there's others, but I'm hoping that I can share whatever I have in watching other people's videos. Even if it's medical background, if people have specific questions. As being an EMT, I've been doing this, almost 29 years. I think I may have some knowledge on some of this stuff. And if there's what to pack in a prepper bag, if you want to know about setting up a medical aid tent at your camp, how to put fire breaks in if you have property of your own, stuff like that, feel free to ask. I'll do whatever I can to help you with that. How to set up portable fire systems if you need to, if you have a water source on your property, using portable pumps if you would need to, worried about wildland fire, stuff like that. I think that's some of the biggest prep issues I have. And under the weapons and ammo, that may come down to even a good quality knife also. After watching Backwoods Ray's video, it made me think. He's just like I am, I have the Walmart knives. I have one that's a little better quality, but sometimes I think, how long would that knife really last in the wilderness setting? It's not made to cut down trees and stuff like that, as Backwoods Law was discussing today or whenever he did his video. So that's some of my biggest things I can think of. Hopefully this is an alright video. Like I said, this was my first ever video response for anything with FLP. So hopefully this will help people learn some things and you have any comments, please let me know. Thank you and have a great night.